Can you see me? Well, you must be able to see me. You're looking right at me. Are you sure you can see me? Most people can't. The only ones who can see me are the ones whose hearts are full of courage and tenderness. You're sure you can see me? Well, all right. Come on in, come on in. Yes, sit down anywhere you want. Oh, watch out for the pot. Watch out for the pot. Yes, it's full of boiling hot liquid. Watch out for that. Oh, you like my flowers? Thank you. They came from just over there. Yes, sit down, sit down. Well, now that you're here, would you like to hear a story? Okay. Well, first, I think I'd like to tell you about my mother. Would you like to hear about my mother? Now, you see, my mother wasn't born a giant woman's, but she became a giant woman's, like me. Would you like to hear how my mother became a giant woman's? Oh, my name is Belda, by the way. Belda. My mother's name was Minda McGonagall. Now, when my mother was very little, just a baby actually, she went on a big adventure on a ship with her parents. And there was a shipwreck. And her parents, they died. And my mother, she was taken to an orphanage. And this orphanage was a terrible place. The woman who ran the orphanage was a terrible woman, and all the kids at the orphanage, they were very mean to my mother, and they were always saying things to her like, "Why are you so weird? Stop being so strange. Why can't you just be normal? Why can't you just be more like us?" Ugh. And so one night, I think my mother was probably around 6 years old. She was eating dinner, and she dipped her spoon into the porridge. The same thing she had for dinner every night, this gray glop. She gathered some in her spoon and tipped over her spoon and watched the gray glop slop into her bowl. And she said to herself, quietly in her mind, no one else heard, she said, "I'm gonna get out of here." And that night she packed up what few things she had and she left the orphanage. Now, this orphanage was just over across the marsh. It used to be there. It's not there anymore. Just over across the marsh over there. And she left in the middle of the night, and she ran across the meadow, and she crossed the marsh. And back then, there wasn't a bridge that went across the marsh, so she waded through the cattails and the muck and the moss, and she made it to the other side. And when she got to the other side, she entered a dark and beautiful forest. And when she entered the forest, she heard singing. And the singing wasn't exactly like the flute-like singing of the hermit thrush. It was a little bit more raw. It sounded kind of terrible, but also very beautiful. She heard this terribly beautiful singing, and she followed it. She followed it through the woods until she saw a little fire crackling. And she came around the corner, and that's when she saw Welda and Melda, who I call my aunties. Now, Welda and Melda, they were giant womans. They were huge. They were like 2 stories tall. And they had big, terrible smiles and big, hairy armpits. And they were singing their terribly beautiful songs. And my mother wasn't afraid. I don't think my mother was afraid of much. And so she inched a little bit closer. And Welda and Melda saw her. And they could see that my mother could see them. And so they knew that her heart must have been full of courage and also full of tenderness. And they took my mother in. And they raised her as their child. And they taught her how to sing their terribly beautiful songs. And they taught her how to stew their spells, how to stew the medicine of the giant Womuns. They taught her all about the forest. And my mother lived with them. She lived with them for almost her whole life. Now, there's another story I would like to tell you. And this is the story of Bunker. Do you know who Bunker is? Have you ever heard of Bunker? You may have seen Bunker, but probably not. When Bunker's around these woods, he likes to stay pretty secret. Would you like to hear about Bunker? Okay. Well, Bunker used to live, on the other edge of the woods in a shack. He lived all alone in a shack on the edge of the woods. And it was very interesting because Bunker was very grouchy, sometimes very angry. It didn't really seem like he had any friends. It didn't seem like he had much family. But for some reason, he could see Welda and Melda. And he would always come around with his grouchy voice and all his anger, and he would Hufflepuff right up to Welda and Melda, and he would say, "Oh, you giant Womuns, one day I'm going to get you to leave here. Do you even own this property? Where's your deed to this property? I have my deed to my shack. If you want to see it, you can come over and see it. I own it. Do you even own this place where you live? Oh, your terrible singing. I hear your terrible singing, and I hear your terrible spells, and one of these days I'm going to get you to leave." And Welda and Melda would, "Okay, Bunker. All right, Bunker. You run along now, Bunker." And maybe sometimes they'd be like, "Rah!" And then Bunker would be like, "Woo!" And eventually he'd leave. But he'd still come by every so often. And whenever Bunker came around, Welda and Melda would tell my mother to hide in the bushes so Bunker wouldn't know that she was there. So one night, Bunker came around and he said, "This time, I'm really going to get you to leave. Tomorrow, I'm bringing the police, and they're bringing a lawyer, and they're going to kick you out. They're going to see that you don't own this property, and you're going to have to go." And Welda and Melda still just did the, "Okay, Bunker, okay. You run along now. Go ahead." Rah! And then Bunker, he would eventually go. And sure enough, the next day, they heard Bunker coming through the forest, and he wasn't alone. He came down the little path, crashed through the brambles a little bit, and he had brought the police with him, and a lawyer. And he came to where Welda and Melda were my aunts, and of course my mother was hiding in the bushes. And Bunker said, See them there? See their pot? Their pot stewing? See their blankets? See them? They're right there. They live here. They don't even own this place. They're just camping out. There they are." And the police were kind of like, "Well, Mr. Bunker, I'm sorry, but we don't see anyone." And Bunker said, "Are you kidding? They're right there. As plain as day. They're right there. I see them right now. They're laughing at us." And the police said, "Sorry, Mr. Bunker, but we have better things to do. Good day." And they walked away and left Bunker standing there looking at Welda and Melda. And he kind of just went, and turned around and then just muttering his way back to his cabin. So the next day, Bunker went to work. Now, Bunker worked for a corporation that made plastics. And Bunker had a very small cubicle. It was like a little miniature room inside of a bigger room. And a lot of times people in their cubicles, they'll have their computer, and sometimes they'll have a picture of their family, maybe a picture of their dogs, maybe a flower. People put all sorts of things in their cubicle, but Bunker didn't have anything in his cubicle. All he had was his computer. Because like I said, I don't know where Bunker's family was, and I don't think he had any friends. So he went to work, and he told us this story later, but the next day, Bunker went to work, and he was in his cubicle, and something very strange began to happen. Suddenly, the sound of all the people in the rest of the office typing on their computers, the sound got louder and louder, until it was almost deafening. And Bunker felt as though the walls of his cubicle were getting smaller and smaller and smaller, closing in. And he could hear other people talking in the office, but it sounded kind of like loud and fast, and he couldn't understand what anything was saying, and it was the walls closing in, walls closing in tighter and tighter until it became almost totally overwhelming to Bunker. He almost couldn't stand it anymore, so he got up from his chair and he left the office. He left the office right in the middle of the day. And he had actually driven his car to work, but he didn't get into his car. He just started walking. And he walked and he walked and he walked and he walked. He walked all the way back to the woods. When he got to the woods, he didn't turn toward his own cabin, his own house. He headed toward the shack of the giant Womuns. And as he got closer, Welda and Melda could hear that someone was coming, so they told my mother to go hide in the bushes. And as he got closer, they started to hear a sound. It sounded kind of like... It was the sound of Bunker's tears. Bunker was sobbing with his whole body. And he came to the entrance of the shack, and he just stood in front of the entrance, crying, sobbing. Now, Bunker had given my aunts, Welda and Melda, a lot of trouble over the years. A lot of trouble. And so when they first saw Bunker crying, they sort of gave him one of these. But my mother, she slowly crept out of the bushes, and she slowly walked up to Bunker, and she reached out and she grabbed his hand and held it tight. She grabbed his hand, and Bunker was still sobbing. But my mother just held Bunker's hand, and she slowly led him into the shack, and she laid out a pillow and a blanket for him to sit on, still holding his hand. Still holding his hand, she sat him down, and she held his hand the whole night, and Bunker cried the whole night. It was as if he was crying all the tears that he'd never cried for his whole entire life. And finally, as dawn broke over the marsh, Bunker lay down and fell asleep, my mother still holding his hand. And from that moment on, I can't say what happened, but he also began to live with Welda and Melda, my aunts. He lived with them, and over time, they also began to teach him their ways. They taught him their spells, and they tried to teach him their terrible songs, and they sort of taught him the ways of the woods, all the different little things that they tended all throughout the forest. And after a couple years, one night my mother said she heard Welda and Melda talking late by the fire. And they were sort of saying, "Are you sure? I mean, who'd have thunk it? I mean, is he really ready? I don't know. I guess I just feel like it's the only choice to make." And finally, my mother heard them say, "Yes, tomorrow we will give Bunker the medicine of the giant Womuns." Now, anyone who drinks the medicine of the giant Womuns becomes a giant Womuns. They may not change in size, although some do. Some do. They may not grow any extra hair, although some do. Some do. Outside, they may not appear differently at all, but inside, they've changed. All that's wild in them comes out of its cage. And also, when you drink the medicine of the giant Womuns, you begin to feel the earth. You feel the body of the earth moving inside your own body, and you can't ignore it. The feeling is too strong. This is what happens when you drink the medicine of the giant Womuns. So the next day, my aunts, they called Bunker over to the fire. And now, I should tell you, The medicine of the giant woman's is made from gathering the dew off the violets in spring. And this water, this beautiful violet purple water, is then combined with the tears of giant women's. The tears of giant women's from many generations past, and the tears of giant women's who are alive today. These two liquids are combined to create, and they're stewed over the fire to create the medicine of the giant woman's. Now, before my aunts ever gave someone the medicine of the giant woman's for the first time, they always sang this particular song. Would you like to hear it? Okay, I'll sing it for you. My mother became a giant woman and came to sing and came to sing and came to sing the fearsome songs of love, the spells of giant woman carry the light of stars and move the winds and move the winds and move the winds to weave what can't be seen. Are you a giant woman? I think I see your courage, and you may choose, and you may choose, and you may choose to drink the medicine of tears and violets. Do you dare? Do you dare? Do you dare? Do you think that Bunker dared? He did. So my aunts, they took this, the violet medicine, the dew of the violets, and they took this, the tears of giant women, and they poured them together. And the medicine was made. And Bunker drank it. And he became a giant woman's. And all around these woods, all the flowers that you see, it became Bunker's job to tend to those flowers, to help them grow. So any flowers that you see, you can know that Bunker was there, helping them along. And you might see Bunker in these woods, he's still wearing the same suit that he was wearing the day he left work. It's very tattered now. He's still wearing those same old shoes, but the sole is kind of flopping out, and you can see his big toe coming through the leather. But now he wears this beautiful green felt hat, and there's a little slit in the hat. And in the slit in the hat, Bunker will usually take a couple of the flowers that he's tending and put them inside his little green hat. So if you see a little hat moving through the woods with maybe a few blooms poking out, you might be seeing Bunker. So keep your eyes out for him. And now I wonder. I mean, you can see me. It's clear to me that your hearts are full of courage and tenderness. Would you? Would you dare to drink the medicine of the Vi? Well, I probably shouldn't even ask. Well, I already did ask. Would you dare to drink the medicine of the giant woman's?